Welcome to 44 and 1 with GVizzle and Tempest. Like and subscribe, and here we go.
So a Florida couple was traveling in Georgia. And they went to a lodge that on the menu, it says there is a parent surcharge for parents who are unable to parent unruly children. They thought it was a joke until they got a $50 charge on their bill. And now a lot of people have a lot of feelings about it.
Yeah, I've been seeing the feelings, which are quite funny. And I wouldn't be surprised if either it's the people with the feelings against it are either going to be people who have shitty kids and they can't parent them, or they're people with good kids and they can't understand how badly behaved kids are.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. And I did see like follow-up articles where women were like, my children are entitled to be as loud in a restaurant as they want to be, just like you are. It's like, no, because adults get exited out of restaurants when they're being unruly. Children, people just look at them like,
oh, I wish I could exit that child from the restaurant, but I'm not allowed.
Yes. And like this on their menu, it says no respect, no service. Be respectful to the staff. Parent surcharge. Like they could not have been more clearly advised that this is going to happen. And even if, again, I'm not a parent, but even if I had kids and I saw that on a menu, even if I thought it was a joke,
I'd ask.
I would still think, not even that, even if I didn't ask and thought it was a joke, I would still be like, they take this seriously enough to put it at the top of their menu. I'm going to make sure my children are well behaved. And they were just like, they must be kidding. Let's just let our kids go fucking crazy.
It's just the entitlement, and it's a level of entitlement that we do have in the UK, but it seems to be on a bigger scale in the United States. Like you see, it permeates all of their culture of just this, like because just for example, that freedom of speech, okay, and freedom for all these other things. In the UK, my freedom ends where yours begins. All right, so that's kind of like how our freedom of speech and everything works. In the United States, they have, well, I can say whatever I want. And no consequences. It's like,
that's the thing that's the thing. You're free to say what you want, but you're not free from the consequences of that speech. Just like these parents are not free from the consequences of their children acting a fool in a restaurant. There was a Reddit thread where this guy posted, "Am I the asshole?" And he clearly didn't want to be told yes. So he posted, "Am I the asshole?" because he thought kids should be kids. And my kids, I'm not going to stop them from being loud and playing in public spaces like parks. Okay, yeah, parks, that's what parks are there for. Restaurants, movies, libraries are his other examples. He's like, I'm paying good money to be there. It's like, yeah, so is everybody else. We're paying good money to be with the person that we're with, not to hear your children screaming in the restaurant or running around the restaurant. So like, there was not a single person who said, no, you're not the asshole. Everybody was, yes, you're the asshole. In restaurants, movies, libraries, places you expect it to be quiet, you're expected to be fucking quiet. You're not a Chuck E. Cheese. This isn't a family restaurant. And he would not accept it. He was responding to every single comment, just being like, you just hate kids. And people are like, I have kids. I just don't
I don't want other people. Kids. Yeah, I don't want other people to have to look after somebody else's kids. And also we have to make a distinction here. Like, we're not talking about newborns where if they're crying, you can't help it. But everybody, that's part of the social contract. Nobody will get away with moaning about a crying newborn. Like, they'll be told to shut the fuck up. It's a newborn. What are you gonna do? Yes. But when they get to toddler,
what you will hear people say is maybe you should have got a babysitter or like stay home. That's what you will hear people say.
But I mean, like, if you're on a plane or something, you're somewhere where you can't leave with your kid.
Yes.
You know, like, if you're taking a newborn to a cinema, I'm questioning your parenting ability.
Right.
It's loud. It's not fit for newborns.
I agree. I have seen photos of people with children at like toddlers at concert or sports events, and they have headphones on. It's like, just pay the $10 an hour for a babysitter or whatever it is, 15, 20 bucks an hour.
Your kid doesn't have to be there for that.
No.
Ridiculous.
And then what kills me, like I've had friends in the past, and again, I'm not a parent, so I'm not going to tell somebody how to parent, but you can see the fallacies in some of their thinking because they're like, they'll have their kids out at 10 o'clock and their kids are being fussy, and they're like, I don't understand. It's like, well, the children they have routine. You're breaking their routine, and then you're concerned about why they're fussy, because they should be asleep right now, because that's the routine that you've established for them. And a break from that routine, they're 5. They don't understand. The logic that you're trying to instill in them.
But I think that there's criticism there's a difference between criticizing somebody's parenting style and if they're just not parenting.
True.
Like, that's different. So like what these people are doing in that restaurant is not parenting. So the restaurant have informed you that they bear the right to refuse service. That's true of any establishment you're in. They just don't exercise that. It's up to them to refuse service of whomever they want.
Exactly. And if they've told you loud and clear, there's a surcharge for parents who have unruly children, mind your children. And your children shouldn't be unruly as a general rule in public spaces. Like, and again, I keep the way I was raised. When it was dinner time, we all ate dinner together as a family. If we went out to restaurants together, which we didn't do often, but if we went out to restaurants, it was dinner time. Same rules apply. You sit at the table and have dinner with the family. You don't start screaming and running around the restaurants. But and a friend of mine is currently pregnant. And I think it's her sister or brother-in-law's kids are those unruly kids that when it's dinner time, they eat wherever they want. Parents have to grab their arm as they're running past the table to shove food in their mouths. And her mother-in-law is like, well, we'll see what it's like when they're your kids. And she's like, no, I'm in charge of how I raise my kids. If I'm establishing those rules, those are the rules of our house. It doesn't happen by accident that your kids are just running around.
No, that's extreme. And then if it was that difficult, how could my mum, as a single mum, raise me to sit at the table and eat the food? She didn't have anybody to tell her what to do.
Exactly.
You know? And
parents have been doing it since the dawn of time. And I get now there's this like gentle parenting and let kids be kids. But kids also, it's never too early to teach kids what's appropriate behavior. So you don't wait until they're 17 to be like, no, you have to sit at the table to eat, or you can't just walk around snapping girls' bras. Boys will be boys. Like, you got to teach them the rules of adulthood because they're future adults.
This is what gentle parenting will lead to. It will lead to higher violent crime because you're not helping children understand boundaries. You can't be saying to them as children, saying, no, you don't have boundaries, do whatever the fuck you want. And then when that boy becomes a man, saying, well, no, you can't just approach a woman whenever you like.
Exactly.
He's like, well, what are boundaries? You never fucking told me about them.
It's like we teach children stranger danger, but then when they become adults, apparently all strangers are your friends because women are supposed to be perfectly okay with men being approaching them wherever they want to approach them.
And honestly, I think that humans are a bit backwards sometimes compared to the other species on the planet. All right. When we've got this entire generation now, Gen Z, right, who have been raised with helicopter parenting, gentle parenting, positive psychology, and all that guff, right? And then it's because Gen X, we had a shit life when we were kids. And we're like, well, we don't want our kids to experience what we did. And we don't want them to have to work as hard as we did. We want them to actually enjoy their life a bit. And then we just overcorrect. But what does a cat do? If a cat has a difficult upbringing, right? What does a cat do when it has children? It fucking teaches the kittens about danger and how to be afraid of things so that you can protect yourself from threats in the world. Humans don't do that. Why don't we do that?
That's an excellent question. And also I think you're correct. When you said that the Gen X overcorrected, that's totally true because now everybody gets a participation trophy. Nobody learns how to lose. And I saw this a lot when my niece was dancing. She won often. And when she didn't feel like she needed to practice. So when she didn't win, it was because she didn't practice, but then she couldn't grasp why she didn't win because she's always won and she didn't know how to handle losing.
Yeah.
So like we need to teach kids how to lose. We need to teach kids that the realities of life. And I think, and this is so weird because I saw this on Reddit this morning. I said I was going to take a Reddit break, but it's like a car accident. I can't look away. These guys are in these subreddits talking about how much they hate women. And they're saying words hate. They're saying women are, we're vermin, we're evil. This is their language. And then they wonder why they're single. We're evil vermin who are liars and gaslighters and manipulators. And why? Because when they were boys, their mom said, aren't you going to be a heartbreaker when you're older? Any girl's going to be lucky to have you. And then they grew up thinking, yeah, anyone is going to be lucky to have me. And now that they're not, they're like, women are the evil ones. And when women show up in the comments to say like this, you are painting us all with the same brush, right? The first ones to say not all men are the first ones who will say it's all women. Because women will show up in comments in droves to dispute what they're saying, and they don't believe us. Like yesterday, I got to a debate. This guy was like, all women want the same man. They all want the same attract, or they all find the same man attractive, tall, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, listen, different women find different things attractive. I know women who go crazy for John Hamm, and he's that tall, dark, handsome. I don't see it. He's like a Ken doll to me. I don't see anything there. And then other women go like, he's like, women don't want average height, bald men, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, are you kidding me?
J.K. Simmons?
Like J.K. Simmons, Stanley Tucci, Patrick Stewart, that octogenarian hot piece of ass. Like, I will take that. Mark's, who else? Jason Statham even. I mean, and I'm taller than Jason Statham. I've met him. I stood across from him. That hands down any day over Jason Momoa. But they don't believe it. They just think we're hiding secrets. So these men will never believe women when they tell them.
Yeah, that they've been gaslighted by their group, their community, into thinking that women will always lie, and that they're lying to get back at you. And it is because I think their group, like whoever's formed the group, a lot of the people involved in it just want to spread their hate, because like men tend to express their suffering and expel it out and make other people suffer, so that they can. It's a way of how men cope with their suffering, is is projecting it onto others, and that's what happens.
And there's a lot of like, why aren't women working on men's issues, and why aren't we? And it's like, well, you need to. We're not going to start the movements for you. You need to start them, and then you will find allies in other groups. But your allies aren't the ones starting those groups for you. But they get very, very angry. And they also don't realize, a lot of the same types of men who say shit like that aren't realizing that when women are fighting for women's issues, a lot of those have trickle-down effects to men's issues as well. When women are fighting for better mental health supports, that impacts everybody. When women are fighting for more equality in the workforce and in education, that helps everybody. But they're so focused on certain things. It's like parents who are just so focused on, let my child be a child. They all just compartmentalize, and nobody gives a shit about anybody else.
But you're like, parenting like that, you're more likely to create an incel than you are to create a free, well-adjusted person. It just doesn't work.
Exactly.
And the other side of it is you're probably just going to create, like, if you have a daughter, you're probably just going to create a pillow princess or something, you know, because you're going to feel entitled. And then you're going to create, like, something I'm seeing a lot in Gen Z is like, I sympathize with their plight a lot. But where I don't have much time for them is their lack of get up and go to fix the situation. They tend not to want to do that. And I see it a lot with the incels, like a lot of the younger ones are very much, they want other people to solve it. The world is shit. I don't know what to do. And they feel helpless. But it's because their parents did all that positive shit, but never taught them how to see a problem and be assertive in tackling it. Like you have to be taught that. That's not just a natural skill people have.
And that's the thing that we miss out on. Like, you have to learn how to drive a car and pass the test to drive a car. But anybody can be a parent. Anybody can be a parent time and time and time and time again, regardless of how much they fucked it up on previous attempts. There needs to be some sort of, I know this isn't going to be popular, but there needs to be some sort of measure of parentability. Can you actually perform these tasks as they are laid out for you, so that you are going to encourage and develop a functional human being versus some future therapy bills.
And the other thing is that isn't related to intelligence. People will think you're talking about intelligence, and you're not.
Not
like I've seen some low IQ people, like literally low IQ people, can raise kids, and it's
emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And it's completely, there's no book smarts involved in being a good parent.
And some of the worst parents I've seen are doctors, postgraduates, people with PhDs, some teachers. They're some of the worst parents out there.
And it all trickles down into how you were raised. And my family, my parents being, immigrants, where family was all you had. They didn't have large social groups. And at the time that my parents grew up in Portugal, on the island they were in the Azores, the school on that island went up to grade 4. So if you wanted your children to progress in education past grade 4, you had to send them to a different island. So you needed to have the money to do that, and someone who lived on that island who would be willing to take your kids in. So the majority of these kids didn't have further than a grade 4 education. but many of them raised, like my parents, we had our issues as a family. There
All
is
families
no
do.
doubt of that. Yes. And my dad was an abusive alcoholic, but my mom did a wonderful job of,
Yeah.
raising her children in an environment that protected us from a lot of those things and was realistic. Like if we fell and hurt ourselves, it was like, okay, you hurt yourself, get out, clean it out, wash it off, carry on.
Yeah.
We were never coddled or any of that stuff. And I know there's a balance to be had, but
we're not finding
the pendulum is strung too far.
Yeah. That we're not finding that balance. Gen X was too free range, and Gen Z were basically not free range enough. They didn't have the chance.
Who came after Gen X? Was that Gen?
That was millennials.
Okay, millennials were still largely raised by boomers, and was probably, they probably had some of the most balance because they had tired boomers. So they had tired boomer parents and Gen X siblings.
Because the thing is like I'm on like the cusp of between Gen X and millennial, but I'm more Gen X because of the culture of where I grew up. Like South Wales was just destitute of culture and economy and healthcare resources, everything. It was very much like we were about 15 years behind Canada was at the time, for example.
Really?
Yeah,
wow.
Like it was really depressing. I mean, there was a reason why Bridgend, the county I grew up in, is the suicide capital of the UK. There was like a whole spate of them, like 10 kids killed themselves in the space of 3 months in some weird fucked up suicide pact. There's a film about it called Bridgend.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
I'm gonna look that up. That's crazy.
Yeah. And then part of it is because like there's like ex-mining communities and stuff, and it was like really industrialized in the south, and yeah, it was just like there's a couple of cities there, Newport and Port Talbot. When you drive through, you could just feel the pollution clinging to you from the factories.
Wow,
it's horrible.
And that's I think a problem when some communities are built around one industry. If that industry fails, that entire community is fucked. And so several years ago, I bought a bunch of books on ghost towns in Ontario. So my husband and I had planned this like week-long vacation where we were going to do day trips to these different ghost towns. And the majority of them were like, oh, they built this, they built this town because they thought a train line was going to run through it, and then they'd be a stop on that train line. But then when the train didn't come through, everyone just up and left. So when you go to that town, it's like there's still, shitty curtains blowing in the wind, and like these decrepit houses, and there was a street that just stopped being built because people were like, oh, the train's not coming, we're fucked, let's go. And they just up and left. They just up and left.
And then there's another, like, I think generational difference, and that's with how Gen Z use social media. And I think it puts the rest of us off, because like we see like these Gen Zs crying or complaining or whining, like we see it as whining, bitch moaning and complaining. But they see it, like the amount of people that commented on that TikTok I did the other day, saying that that's them coping with the situation. That's how they speak to people, is that like they put their pain out, and then other people can see it, so they know each other are suffering, and then they know other people, like if somebody else sees it, they'll know that somebody else is going through the same thing they are. But we see it so cynically by comparison to them. And then I'm inclined to believe them, because I mean, I'm not Gen Z, so I'm inclined to believe them when they say why they're doing it.
And also we were the generation that came up with, or largely used, don't be a pussy. No, big girl pants on. Our entire generation was around, suck it up. Life is unfair, suck it up.
Not even the parents care about you.
Exactly. And so if this generation is being more out there, then maybe it's going to encourage more and more people to do it, right? And I keep going back to men, because like there's again a lot of these subreddits where men are talking about how lonely they are and how they have these lack of ability to share their, or willingness to share their emotions, or a fear of sharing their emotions. So the more they see these kids doing it, the more they see emotion being normalized on social media, maybe it will help break down some of that stigma that it's okay. Everyone knows you feel emotions. Like, I don't know why people are so afraid of sharing their emotions. Everyone, it's like that. They need to have that kids book, Everybody Poops. They need to have one that's Everybody Feels. It's okay to have feelings. It's okay to do that. So not okay to be destructive in your feelings, or to blame other people for how you're coping with your feelings. But maybe they need to see more and more of that. I think it's also an inexperience. Like,
I think so.
when my niece had her first heartbreak at 16, it was the worst thing that's ever happened to her in her life. And up until that point, it was because she was 16.
Mm.
Had she been 36 and reacted the same way after a 6-week relationship, it would have been like, girl, seriously? Like,
yeah.
the more experience you cultivate, the more things don't phase you because you've experienced on par or worse.
Yeah. And it's how you respond to that suffering as well, kind of sets you up for the next time it happens. Like, it sets your expectations. Like, for example, like I think I developed like a like the worst way of dealing with stuff is that it just didn't bother me. Like, all this bad stuff that happened, it would just be like, oh well, fine, whatever. Probably deserved it.
Wow. Wow.
And then I think that's like the other extreme of like the being emotional and expressing it. And then the other extreme is just like you develop like into this really calloused sort of unemotional person because you're just so used to it. So I think that kind of gave me more hope for Gen Z in the fact that when they explained to me why they express themselves on social media, and the fact that they were willing to explain it as well. Like, none of them got, like, I got a couple of shitty comments on the video, but that was just mostly just dickheads. But the overwhelming majority of people were sharing just their experiences, why they feel this way, why they're responding to this way to things on social media. And I was like, oh, you know what? Actually, I feel a bit more comfortable now. Like, I feel a bit happier that the future's in better hands if you guys are willing to explain it. Yeah.
And it's an interesting because multiple generations, not just Gen Z and millennials, but multiple generations have largely responded positively to representation in media when they see, in mixed race couples or gay couples or LGBT, right? You see that you're seeing people of different weights, all of it. And we're seeing more and more TV shows are giving you average looking people, right? We're seeing more of The Office than we are Melrose Place. And everyone's like, yeah, that's great. We need representation of who real people are and what life is like. But there's also emotional representation as well. We can't just always expect people to be happy-go-lucky because that sets an unrealistic view for people who are watching that. Because some kids do still watch those Instagram or TikTok influencers who live in these grand houses and have these beautiful lives and think that's what it's like every day, where we need to, pull back the curtain and see what it's really like. That the more you see people are messy and sloppy and how they deal with that emotional sloppiness to become more resilient and to cope and have better coping mechanisms and teach their children better coping mechanisms, that's better for everybody because we'll be able to see like what I'm feeling isn't unusual. It's part of the human process.
I think the thing that is going to be hard to kind of find a way around is that we need more Matthew Perrys and less of the influencers who act up just because they're celebrities and they just want to get likes and comments and they act in like a really crazy stupid way, pretend they have all these mental illnesses when they clearly fucking don't. You need more like celebrities who can be good spokespeople for stuff, like Matthew Perry. I think he was such a fucking big loss, and that like because he was able to sit calmly and talk to people about what he'd been through, and he wasn't doing it as a way of getting himself money and fame because he already had that. But there's too many celebrities out there at the moment who do it just for money and fame, so they fabricate all these problems that they have, and it fucks it up for the young kids because they think, oh, that's what autism's like, or that's what bipolar's like, when it fucking isn't.
It's true. And more, I think more and more celebrity that does that, the better. Like there's a Canadian, actually French born, but Canada now. He's the host of, or a judge on the Great Canadian Baking Show. And I was just curious about the host of the show. I don't know why. It's like my adult version of Teen Magazine. It's like, what's your story? What's your story? And he his name is Bruno. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. But he's a very big advocate for mental health. And I was reading his story. And when he was young, he had an absent father. As a boy in France, he met this man at I think he said 6 or 7 that was supposed to be his father. And his dad was like, okay, not my problem. And his mom was physically abusive, emotionally abusive. She died of a drug overdose when he was 33. So now he's an orphan. And then he gets a woman pregnant and he's like, fuck. How am I supposed to do this, right? He had PTSD, he had abandonment issues, he had all these mental health issues. And anxiety attacks and panic attacks. Is like, how am I supposed to? I have never had a positive influence. I've never had a father figure. My mom wasn't a great fit. How am I supposed to do this? And he took it and made it so he became the father that he would have wanted. So he became a good father to his son, even though I don't think he's with the mother. I don't know that story, but sharing that story in such a way that it's not a woe is me or give me sympathy. It was just, these are the facts of my life. It was shit. I did the best that I could with it. And here's where we are now.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not saying you need to own as many pairs of glasses as I do, but I'm also not saying you need to own as many pairs of glasses as I do. Look at the selection of these frames. They are amazing. Head over to GVizzle at the end of this episode, not now. Head over to GVizzle. There is a link and promo code in the description of this video. Promo code GVizzle15 will save you 11% on orders over $50 and 15% on orders over $100. And just come on. Look how beautiful these frames are. I just can't get enough of them. GVizzle.com.
And I feel like the thing that, going back to the Gen Z, that worries me with that stuff is that they don't do the next stage. And I think it's because obviously they're still really young at the moment. They're like in their early 20s now. But what worries me is that there doesn't seem to be that, like, right, well, I'm here now, what do I do about it? It's that next step that a lot of them are missing, because they feel quite hopeless about what the future holds for them. Like they can't see a way out of the current situation. Like
they need to be more solutions focused.
Yeah. Like,
this is the problem. How let's band together and figure out what we can do to get around it and work it.
Exactly. I mean, like, getting young people to run for government. Like, can you imagine if an actual Gen Z actually run for Congress and then
I've always said politicians need to have term limits and age limits, because it's like John Mulaney said, you don't get to order for the table if you're leaving the restaurant. If at a certain age, if you're too old to be a Walmart greeter, you are too old to run an entire country. They need to have people who are invested, who know the problems that are facing not only their own generation, but the ones ahead and the ones behind them, because those are the ones who are going to be solutions focused.
And I don't think it's ageist to say 65 or 70, normal retirement age. You can't do it anymore.
It's still a job. So you should retire at the age that you would be forced to retire if you were working any other job.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the fact that Mitch McConnell is still in government just astounds me. Like, he's barely functional. Same with Joe Biden.
Well, I saw recently they had an announcement that Mitch McConnell, they're like, nothing to see here, everything's fine.
Yeah, he basically blue screened of death. He basically did that.
He just glitched, but we've rebooted his hard drive and everything's good to go. It needs to be balanced. In any work environment, you can't staff a work environment with just people who've got no experience or only people who are completely experienced, because there's a gap in that knowledge. There's a gap in fresh eyes and creativity and different solutioning. So you need to have it as a balance. So government as well should be a balance of different backgrounds, experiences, education levels, experience levels, ages, just to make it whole.
But we have a problem in the UK where the vast majority of our MPs went to Oxford and did PPE, which is politics, philosophy, and economics, and it's a piece of shit degree, and it's supposed to equip them to run government, which it doesn't. And then literally, if you go through the MPs, nearly all of them will have PPE. When I was a kid, I remember there was one MP who used to be a postman. That was about it. There's a few ex-soldiers in there, but they don't tend to be in the party I vote for.
It's just that they're creating a governmental echo chamber.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't vote for
We should run the world.
Yeah. I got shit the other day. Have you ever heard of a guy called Jeremy Corbyn?
The name sounds familiar.
He's a very left-wing MP here. And then I got shit in the comments the other day because somebody was shocked that I spoilt my ballot in 2017 when it was Jeremy Corbyn versus Theresa May. And I wouldn't vote for either of them. And then people that watch my channel know I'm a libertarian. In the UK, you call it Liberal Democrat, not the party, the philosophy. And they were shocked that I wouldn't vote for Jeremy Corbyn. I was like, he's a left-wing authoritarian. He wants a centralized government to dictate all of these agendas to people. I like freedom and local power. Why would I vote for that fucking thing? I don't know what I'm talking to.
Follow you? As
I
a
think a couple
result,
did, yeah, a couple did, which is quite funny. And I'm like, that's nothing to do with the psychology I talk about. Like, it's so weird.
people are fickle.
They really are. I mean, like, it doesn't, like, I think it's a them problem. Like, if they don't follow somebody because of an idea, right, that I used to vote Labour when I was younger, right? And I realized how bad they were because I looked into it and I understood more about the country. And I was like, oh, fuck, these people are dangerous. And then I grew out of it. I grew out of voting for Labour and then I moved on to other ideas, which ended up now I can't vote for anybody because they're all wankers.
I kind of wish you could vote for people in their policies.
Yeah.
Right? Like you look at politicians, you're like, I like your social programs, but I don't like what you want to do financially. Yes. I don't like what you want to do with education. So like if you could just, okay, you're in charge for the economy because you're smart. You do the social policy. Like if you could just have a mixed.
The thing is, this is the thing, is that there's nothing stopping them doing that. It's just that they won't. So the people in charge, they put their lackeys in the job. But they know that, say, like, for example, we used to have a politician here called Vince Cable. He was really good in economics. And when we had the coalition government, Conservative and Lib Dems, he was the economics minister, or the chancellor, or whatever it's called. And he, but then if they didn't have a coalition, they wouldn't have put him there, even though he was clearly the best man for the job.
He should apply for the job just like everybody else does.
Yeah,
Just like, I'm going to pick my buddy. We played cricket together. So
exactly. We went to Eton together. And that's basically how Boris packed his cabinet, was with that shit. Like, oh, well, I know him. He helped me do this.
Make them apply for the job just like anybody else. Economists and people who have studied the economy should be the ones running the economy.
Exactly. And then the thing is, like, I also think, I hate the fact that who we vote for our local MP, which is super important, that is tied to who runs the country, the person at the top. So so in the last election, people were voting for Boris or it was basically only Boris, like, because he was the only, And then nobody even voted for Rishi Sunak. He's in charge now. Nobody fucking voted for him. Boris just quit and then Rishi's in charge. And it's just like, okay, so you might have a really good, even if he's Tory, you might have a really good MP locally. Like where some of my family live, like they have a really good Tory MP there, and I would be tempted to vote for her myself, but I won't because Boris was in charge. And it's like, so if I vote for her, I get fucking Boris Johnson, but she's really good for the local politics, and like she knows the area really well.
That's unfortunate. There needs to be a break of that system. In Canada, we have so many parties that it's almost like. And I don't follow Canadian politics to the extent that I probably should, but we all often have minority governments because there are so many parties that get like 4 votes that there's never that like, this is how our country's going to move going forward. There's always this gap, this bottleneck of minority governments and competing priorities and who wants to do what. It's just.
I think we kind of need
exhausting.
In our country, we kind of need that in a way to save us from dictatorship, because at the moment we basically live in a pseudo dictatorship now. And like our home secretary, she wants to I can't even believe this is real. She wants to expand the definition of extremism to include anything that undermines the British government.
What?
Yeah, it's really super vague and shady.
So anything she doesn't like is extremism.
Yeah.
Wow.
And when the Israel-Hamas thing happened recently, anybody who was waving a Palestinian flag should be labeled a terrorist. That's what she wanted. Wow. And they refused. They refused to do it. But it's one of the few times they stood up to her.
Gadzooks.
This is the same woman that wanted to fly our illegal immigrants off to Rwanda. So I don't put anything past her.
Oh, that one. That one.
Do you know anything about this? There's this guy that keeps popping up on my feed on YouTube. I don't know how to pronounce his name. It's a French name. Poliev?
Pierre Poliev, I believe is how you pronounce it. Not a ton. I see this commercials on on TV.
All I get, right, this is why it's so scary about politics, because it's so easy to diss Trudeau right now, because he's so, my opinion as a Brit, he is so fucking incompetent and dangerous. self-serving, and it's easy to go for him. It's easy to attack him, right? There's a lot to attack him on. So every clip I see of this Poilievre is just him dissing Trudeau. But the comments are full of, yeah, this guy needs to run the country. He's fucking awesome. And I'm like, but we don't know any of his policies. We don't.
Exactly. And that's why I think they should ban attack ads. Tell us what your policies are so we can make an informed decision. Because I'm not going to vote for you just because you don't like the same person that I don't like. That's ridiculous. And they make it so complicated. Some of our newspapers have actually started to put out just a one page, like a spreadsheet of and websites, newspapers. How old am I? Jesus. It's written in graphite pencil. Where they put like spreadsheets on here's the issue and here's how all the different parties think of it. Because I don't want to hear them speak because they're just going to be shit talking each other or trying to sway people, where I just want to know what your policies are. So I would rather go to a website and see the economy. Here's what everybody thinks. I like what you think. And it's that whole checks and balances at the end. If I have more checks in this column than that column, then that's how I'm going to vote. I'm not going to be married to a particular party because that's, I mean, I don't know. I think in the US they have to register as a particular party, where in Canada you can vote however you want to vote. Nobody needs to know.
I don't
so
know.
You can change how you're voting every year. I've heard people say they're registered Democrats or registered.
I think that's their part. They're a member of the party, which means they have a say in the primaries and things, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because here, I mean, I've voted for different parties over the years, and I know people who have, because it just depends on what your policies are. I'm not going to just vote blindly for the same party my entire life, because that's how I'm defining it. Who's going to run the country, or who says they're going to run the country in the best possible way.
Yeah. I think it was the 2010 election. Why I ended up voting for Labour was actually because that's the last time I ever voted for a party, which is quite funny. So it was the first time I was making an informed choice on who to vote for, because I really looked into it. And the BBC had this really good questionnaire on their website, which is like, how do you feel about each issue? Like, what do you think should be done? You could select from multiple options. And it wasn't hugely helpful, but it was the sense that, okay, I was a bit of each of the three parties, Labour, Tory and Lib Dem, but I had a little bit more in the Labour column. So I was like, fine, I'll vote for them.
That's actually a good way to do it. Like, if everybody took a survey and then figured it out. Because I think some people may just, like religion, follow what their parents did. Vote the way your dad voted or your mom voted, just like you go to the same church that they went to. There needs to be more people making informed decisions. Even in school. I know school is meant to, prepare children for, or they say it's to prepare children for the real world, but then you're not giving them real world skills. I've never had to use onomatopoeia in real life, but I have had to do taxes and prepare a resume and go on job interviews and vote. And it would have been really nice to learn how to do those things before I fucked it all up as an adult. And it would have been really nice to learn how to manage a budget and manage a household before I was like, what? I'm in the collection agency. I don't understand. That would have been great.
I think you need to know how each party or their stances on different things will affect you in those areas. How would it affect you applying for jobs or benefits or education and all those things? Like, for example, I had a conversation with my mum, again, back in 2010, because my mum's always voted for Tory, always voted Conservative. And I asked her why, and she goes, well, my mum did. Okay. And then, so I said to her, like, okay, but mum, they've got to look at this, right? You're a single mother, right? All right, I'm grown up, but you still have to look after my sister back then. My sister's on a scholarship so that she can go to this particular school. And if she wasn't on that scholarship, she'd be in the local state school. And then, so, you've got to think like you need benefits and stuff and welfare so you can support my sister so that you can, so that she can get a better start in life to move on. I was like, why would you fucking vote Tory? I was like, you should be voting for Labour. Like, everything about Labour would benefit you.
You're voting against your own best interests because you don't know any better or haven't done the research on it, which I think a lot of people do. A lot of people just go with the flow, or there's that mentality that, oh, all parties are going to fuck it up. So let's just try to find the least worst, or just do what you do because everyone's going to be.
I want to start a big movement of ballot spoiling, because eventually if enough people do it, people are like, well, that means the piece of shit party will win. And I'm like, well, the piece of shit party will always win because they're all pieces of shit. So you need to get millions of people to spoil their ballot so it becomes undeniable that the people are not consenting to the government. And then
have you ever seen the movie, is an old movie with Richard Pryor and John Candy called Brewster's Millions?
no. I
Okay.
know, I've heard of it, but
So Monty Brewster, who's Richard Pryor, I forget who dies, but somebody dies and says, if you can spend, and again, it's been a long time since I've seen it, so I may be off in the numbers. If you can spend $30 million in 30 days with nothing to show for it, you have to own nothing at the end of it, then you inherit $300 million and you can't tell anybody. So he decides to run for mayor, but not run for mayor, because on the ballot, he's none of the above because he doesn't like what's happening. So he's doing it as he expects it, that people are going to vote none of the above. And then at the end, they're going to like scrap it all, start from scratch with different politicians. But he ends up like winning. And he's like, no, that's not what I want. I don't want any of them to do it, but I also don't want to do it. So he's like, it was his kind of scratching the ballot of start from scratch, get rid of all of them because they're all corrupt, they're all fucked up. Better leaders. It's a great movie.
It rings a bell now, actually. The mayor bit doesn't, but I think I've seen a film where this guy had to lose all his money. And isn't it like, because of when it was made, isn't there like some racist undertones to it as well?
Yes. Yes, there was.
There's a guy
all the 80s where everything was a little bit racist.
Yeah. Particularly in the States. I mean, there's a guy I watch on TikTok, Domo Draper, and he has this series where he watches old movies now as an adult, and like how you see it so differently now.
Absolutely. And it's funny going back to watch like old movies. Anytime I watch an old movie, either they very, very rarely hold up. You watch it and you're like, oof, that's problematic. Why did I laugh at that the first time around? And I think our sensibilities change, which I think is why it's kind of ridiculous to make people go back and apologize for things they said 10, 15 years ago, because sometimes you didn't know that a thing was bad 10, 15 years ago. You learn that it's bad, and then you're like, I'm not going to do that thing anymore. Once upon a time, my dad was told to my grandmother was told to give my 8-year-old father cigarettes for his nosebleed.
Yeah.
We know better now, so we don't do that anymore. There are times where people are like, you should have known better. Shoulda, coulda, woulda.
They used to give codeine quite routinely for bad coughs.
There used to be heroin and cough medicine.
And
cocaine and Coca-Cola.
Cocaine and Coca-Cola. Yeah. Man, times have changed.
I mean, the Radium, I think, was the bigger. There was a book called Radium Girls, and it's a true story of the women who were working in the radium factories, painting the watches, and they were licking the brush. They were told to lick the brushes because it's small enough to paint the watch hands. They would cover themselves up in radium to go out because they glowed at night, and they were like, that's fine, it's good for you. People were drinking glasses of radium because they thought it was good for them, and then their jaws were falling off.
Well, now there's a current health fad where people have heard that like there's a paper saying that there's some kind of health benefit vaguely defined in the paper that if you ingest boron in your diet. Yes. And
people are drinking borax.
It's not the same thing, people.
They're probably the same ones who were making fun of the kids who were eating the Tide Pods.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's all those fads. You just never know. Look at the egg. Eggs have been around since the dawn of fucking time. And we have still, every 10 years, it's like, eat eggs, they're good for you. Don't eat eggs, cholesterol. Eat eggs, they're good for you. Don't eat eggs, they're bad for you. We can't even decide if a fucking egg is going to be good for us. And now with such limited information, they're like, you should be eating a pound of cinnamon and cayenne pepper with lemon juice. Because this one study showed that it did this 0.02% change of your body chemistry if you do that.
People are crazy. Like the stuff that it's all. I don't know who to blame. I blame the education system first. I think that they're not teaching people to critically assess information. You know, like they just want people to be mediocre, dull, and then they'll do whatever the government wants. So they put no effort into education.
And I think that comes back to what we're talking about is that teach kids how to problem solve, how to think critically, teach them how to research, teach them how to assess information and work through any contradictions in that information so that they can come out of it. Because then you stop having people who say shit like, do your research, sweaty, and their research has been Facebook.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I do my research. My auntie's memes.
Yes.
Exactly.
I sought out the information I was looking for and I confirmed my bias. So clearly I've done everything right.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I think that I was quite lucky that I'm autistic, even though I didn't know for a long, long time that I was autistic. But I think it made me look at the world in a very certain weird way that I think if I wasn't autistic, I would have been completely, but obviously I would have been a different person. But like, it was almost, I had to kind of like develop a scientific way of experiencing the world to understand what the fuck was going on around me. Because I was just so special needs.
You said it, not me.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's interesting. I mean, even people who live in the same, like my brother, sister, and I, we grew up in the same house with the same parents, but we're all very different people. And the way we consume and approach media and information is very different. And I don't know if it's because I'm so much younger than the two. I mean, although they're only a year apart in age and they're very different as well. But even growing up in the same environment, everything is like you and your sister are very different. You were raised by the same mom. My sister, brother, and I are all very different, and we were raised by the same parents.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of weird. And I wonder how much of it is genetic and how much of it is environmental. Like we can't ever know, but it would be interesting to know. You know.
Because, and there's so much that goes into it. You know, my brother, sister, and I, because they were a year apart in age, they were always usually in the same school at the same time. So they had each other as their influence. And they went through different schooling systems than I went through. By the time I came around, my parents were tired. They were older, and my sister and brother were at an age where they could take care of me if they needed to. So they could watch me after school, or they could do whatever. So all of those kind of factor into it. My parents were, because they didn't come from a background where there was a heavy focus on education, they were the same for us. They didn't, I don't remember ever being asked, do you have homework? Did you do your homework? Where's your homework? None of that stuff. If my mom had a day off of work because she had to go to a doctor's appointment, she'd come into my room and be like, you don't have to go to school today, do you? I'm like, nope. So there is very different influences where we were very kind of much left to our own devices, but not.
Yeah.
Like when it came to school, it's kind of like, you just do what you're going to do. My mom didn't care if I was up till 2 o'clock in the morning watching movies, as long as it didn't interfere with her sleep, because she had to be up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go to work. So there was a lot of autonomy in that instance, but we also didn't abuse it because we had it. We didn't have to sneak around and do all these things, because it was just kind of like, yeah, I can stay up to 2 o'clock in the morning if I want to, but I'm sleepy, so I'm going to go to bed. It wasn't exciting to do that.
Yeah. When you're allowed, it's not as fun anymore. I think I was about 13 when my mum was like, oh, you're going to go to bed soon. And I think it was like about 10 o'clock at night. And I went, Mum, I'm 13 years old now. I'm pretty sure I can figure out when I'm tired.
I'm a man.
Yeah.
I did have a curfew. As long as I was home, I could go to bed whenever. But I had a curfew going out, and it was a negotiation. Like every couple of years, I had to renegotiate the time of my curfew.
That's cool.
To get it a little bit later and later. So there were boundaries. They were just, as long as you're home and I can see you.
Yeah.
If you don't go to bed at 10 o'clock, you're the one who's going to suffer tomorrow. So sort yourself out.
I don't remember, like, I think if I was going out and partying younger, I don't think my mum would have cared or noticed, I don't think.
I did a lot of lying.
Yeah.
So my mom probably thought I was hanging out locally much more often than I was, and going to friends' houses and movies more often than I was going to clubs. So she would, oh, that crafty bitch. She would sneak into my room, not sneak in, it's her fucking house. She would come into my room at like 5 o'clock in the morning when I was asleep and more likely to be honest. And then she would start asking me questions like, oh, what time did you get home last night? Oh, midnight. Where'd you go? Downtown. And then she would save it until I was awake. And then she'd be like, so, what did you do last night? So she was crafty. I didn't get away with that. I got away with some of it, but not all of it.
I think my mum just didn't care. Oh, you're home now.
I have a friend of mine who was like that too. Her mom at 12, she had like an 11:30 curfew, and when she was 14, her mom would go to Florida
Yeah.
for a month and just leave her to her own devices at home by herself.
It's so weird, isn't it? Like, see, like that's the difference. Like, is that to bring it full circle before we stop? Is that that's the difference between parenting style and no parenting?
Mm.
Like the difference between your mum and my mum. Like your mum is parenting. She has a style in it that some people will agree with, some people would disagree with. My mum just wasn't parenting. So,
But
yeah.
he still turned out all right.
Yeah, by the grace of God. Let's not forget that I did
You
get
had a stepfather.
well, sometimes, but
Okay.
and sometimes that was different people. Oh. But let's not forget though that I did develop an addiction to my painkillers, and I'm autistic, and I've had mental health struggles, and I thought joining the army was a good thing, and what was the other one? So I've been a drug addict. Oh, and I've got a criminal record. So, which would have been way worse by just a dice roll if, like, I'd made some choices differently earlier in my life, and I could have just very easily slipped into that crime life. You know.
Nah,
It would
can't
have.
see it.
That's because you know me now.
No, I still can't see it. What kind of crimes do you think you would commit? Like, I don't think you would be a violent offender.
Nah, I probably would have just been like drug dealing or something like that.
You think so?
Yeah. Because it's like, because I had people that were going into that life when I was a teenager, and then that's when I made a choice of disengaging. And then so my best mate, she'd started a relationship, so we were like 16, 17. She was entering into a relationship with a 50-year-old guy because he's a drug dealer. Yeah.
Jesus.
And that was around the time that I just naturally gravitated away from the group.
Good for you.
Yeah. So it's just.
Do you know how any of them are doing now?
I think I don't know how she's doing because she's not on social media or anything. But like a lot of the other people I was hanging around with, they're doing all right now. Like they've got normal lives. Yeah. So they're all like, one of them's even really active with Pride in a local area and stuff like that. So, you know, they've all turned out okay. But I just know that the way I get involved in things, it would have been quite easy just to have slipped through. Like, because when I was a kid, when I was like 12, I used to nick stuff all the time from shops and things just because.
I used to steal stuff from family. I was a little kleptomaniac. I remember this still to this day. I remember going to my aunt's house and I was in her bathroom and I started just kind of like peeking around her drawers and there was this really nice like sapphire and diamond necklace and I was like, oh, I'll put that in my purse. And I brought it home. And I used to very rarely nick stuff as well, but it was mostly like, oh, I'll take this eyeliner or this lipstick and drop it into my sleeve.
Well, like there was a thrill about it. You know?
I didn't wear makeup, but I walked out of there with an eyeliner, like, ooh, look at me, I'm so bad. I'm so dangerous.
Yeah. There was like when I started doing it when I was living at my auntie and uncle's house, because my mum and stepdad were separated. So mum was moving to Portsmouth, and so I had to go ahead for 3 months and live with my auntie and uncle so I could go to the school there. And I started nicking stuff then. I think it's because of just the lack of parenting. And there was a local newspaper shop round the corner, and it was so hard to nick stuff from because it was so small. Oh man, if I can nick like a magazine from there, that was a huge achievement. Yeah,
magazine.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just grabbing stuff I could throw on my sleeve.
Oh no, I was going to fucking Toys R Us stealing action figures.
What?
Yeah,
that's ballsy.
I figured out a way of doing it, like. Because you just kind of like wander around a lot, and then I found a way of like you could like if you had like the toy magazine that they have in Toys R Us, and you just have the action figure in the box, and you just walk around, and then you could just pick at it as you're looking at stuff on the shelves, and it would take you like 20 minutes. Or if there was nobody standing guard on the toilet, you could just nip in quick and then into the toilet, take out the packaging.
That's true. When I was a teenager and worked at a grocery store, people would steal shit all the time. Like a friend of mine worked there as well, and he'd walk out of his shift at the end of the night with like a frozen lasagna under his jacket. Have dinner when he got home.
Oh, brilliant! The most ballsy thing I saw was when I was at McDonald's, and somebody stole a whole box of the meat patties that were frozen because he was having a barbecue at the weekend.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And now, like, seeing the shoplifting that's going on through the United States,
know.
where they're not even being stopped. And
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't stop them either. There was that guy, this older man in Home Depot, who tried to stop somebody who was stealing, and the guy pushed him over and he died. So it's really
Yeah.
not worth your life to
No.
stop someone from stealing from a company that's insured.
The problem is, I think, is that the authorities aren't prosecuting those crimes. That's why it's happening.
Did you hear that woman, though? There was a woman on TikTok. I think it was TikTok. And she would always make these TikTok videos about how she was stealing stuff from Target and that she was never getting caught. But Target was watching. And instead of busting her on a $50 item, they waited until she had stolen enough to actually charge her with like larceny.
Yeah.
So after stealing all this time, as soon as she hit that threshold, they came and arrested her. She's like, "What the fuck?"
That's hilarious.
What's gonna happen? There would never be any consequences.
That's a good place to fade to black. Consequences of your actions. Fuck nuts.
Is that our new theme song?
Yeah.
Enjoy the rest of your day. I finally get to blow my nose now.